I have an announcement to make, Gavin said, tapping his wine glass with a spoon. The chatter around my parents' crowded dinner table died down. All eyes turned toward my husband of 7 years. I watched his face closely, noting the slight tremble in his hand, the way his eyes flicked toward my younger sister, Kala, before settling somewhere above everyone's heads. My heartbeat remained steady, revealing none of the truth I'd been carrying for months. Ilara and I are getting a divorce, he said. His voice grew stronger, more confident with each word. I hadn't planned to share it like this, but since we're all together. My mother gasped. Aunt Patricia clutched her chest. My father's thick eyebrows furrowed in confusion. There's more, Gavin added, reaching across the table to take Kala's hand. Kala and I have fallen in love. We've tried to fight it for years, but sometimes, love chooses you. The silence that followed was deafening. Then finally my mother whispered, "Oh my God." Every head at the table swiveled toward me, waiting for the breakdown, the sobs, the rage. Maybe the dramatic smashing of my mother's best china. Instead, I nodded calmly and said, "Everyone, please check your email." "I'm Ilara Hart," I said quietly. "I'm 32. I work as a digital forensic specialist for a cybersecurity firm in Seattle." Around the table, phones buzzed as family members reached hesitantly into pockets and purses. Confused glances passed from one person to another. I pulled out my own phone and placed it on the table in front of me. My job involves reconstructing digital evidence, tracing electronic footprints, and identifying patterns of online behavior. I continued, my voice even and unshaken. In short, I document the truth. Carefully, thoroughly, patiently. Gavin looked up, his confusion deepening. "Emails? What emails?" "I sent them just before dinner," I replied smoothly. My cousin David opened his inbox first. His brows shot up as he began scrolling. Then my mother, who gasped for the second time that evening, her hand flying to her mouth as she read. Kala's face went pale as she grabbed for her phone, her fingers trembling. "What have you done?" she hissed at me. I didn't even blink. "Just documentation," I said. "Something I happen to be very good at." As more and more of them opened their phones, the expressions around the table began to shift. Shock turned into something else, disgust, anger, betrayal, but not directed at me, at them. What they didn't know, yet, was that those emails contained only a sliver of what I'd uncovered. The full scope of Gavin and Kala's deception ran far deeper than anyone at that table, besides the two of them, could possibly imagine. Gavin and I met 8 years ago at a charity fundraiser for Seattle Children's Hospital. He was a pediatric anesthesiologist, kind, driven, warm. I was there representing my company, which had just donated cybersecurity services to the hospital. Our connection had been instant, intense. A year later, we were married in my parents' backyard under a string of lights and a sky full of stars. The early years were beautiful. We bought a little craftsman-style bungalow in Queen, and spent weekends sanding floors and repainting cabinets. Gavin worked long hours, but he always made time for me. He planned surprise weekend getaways, left sweet notes tucked into my laptop bag, made elaborate Sunday breakfasts just because. I had never felt so loved, so safe. Kala had always been the wild card in our family. She dropped out of college twice, switched cities and jobs like most people switch outfits. When she moved back to Seattle 3 years ago after failing to find herself in Denver, I was the one who offered her a place to stay. Gavin had been hesitant. "Are you sure? Won't it change our dynamic?" "She's my sister," I told him. "Family helps family." What was supposed to be a 2-month arrangement turned into 6. Kala got a job at a local art gallery but claimed rent in Seattle was too steep. I didn't mind. Honestly, I loved having her around. I'd missed her. And having her in the house filled a space I didn't realize had been empty. Looking back, I see the signs I missed. Gavin working later and later. Kala running errands that took hours longer than they should. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. The weird tension that would hit the room the moment I walked in. Like I'd interrupted something. "You two get along well," my mom had said once at a family barbecue, watching Gavin help Kala set up a badminton net. Why wouldn't they? I laughed, completely unaware. "Some men don't get along with their in-laws." "You're lucky," she shrugged. And I believed I was lucky. I really did. If Gavin seemed distracted sometimes, I chalked it up to stress. If Calla watched him with a little too much interest, I blamed my imagination. When she finally moved into her own apartment, she still came by all the time. For Sunday dinners, movie nights, little household repairs she couldn't seem to wait for me to handle. "You're too trusting," my friend Maeve warned me one afternoon after watching Calla call Gavin for the third time during our lunch break. I wouldn't let my sister get that comfortable with my husband. I just laughed it off. Calla's just needy. Besides, it's Gavin. The implication was clear. Gavin would never betray me. He was too good. Too honest. Gavin. The truth came out by accident like it so often does. About 6 months ago, I was using Gavin's laptop to order takeout while he was at work. When I opened the browser, it automatically restored his last session. There it was. His email. Right in front of me. I wasn't looking for anything. I hadn't felt suspicious. But within seconds I found a string of messages between him and Calla. Explicit, unambiguous, impossible to misinterpret. "Last night was amazing," Calla had written. "I can't stop thinking about you. We need to be more careful," Gavin replied. "I don't want to hurt Viv." I read the entire thread like I was reviewing digital evidence for a case at work, clinical, detached, almost numb. The email stretched back 2 years. 2 years of secrets. Of betrayal. Of lies whispered between two people who knew exactly what they were doing. I closed the laptop without ordering dinner. That night, when Gavin came home, I searched his face for something, anything, that would show he was the man who wrote those emails. Some flicker of guilt. Some crack in the facade. He looked exactly the same. "You okay?" he asked. "Rough day." "Just tired," I replied, studying him. The ease of his lie chilled me. The way he moved through our home, our life, effortlessly pretending everything was fine. Over the next few days, I floated between numbness and heartbreak. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed the signs. By day, I went to work, made dinner, laughed at the right moments. It felt like I was acting out someone else's life. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Some part of me hoped there was another explanation. Maybe the emails were just fantasy. Maybe it was a moment of weakness that never went anywhere. Maybe he'd been manipulated. But I'm a professional. I deal in facts, not hope. So I started collecting evidence. Quietly. Methodically. The way I would with any other case. When Gavin said he was working late, I tracked his location. When Calla ran into him by chance, I logged the patterns. I matched credit card charges to hotel bookings, restaurant receipts, rideshare trips. The evidence grew. And so did the ache in my chest. They weren't just having an affair. They were careless, brazen, like they believed I'd never notice. Or worse, like they didn't care if I did. 2 weeks after that first discovery, I sat in my car across the street from a boutique hotel downtown and watched them walk in together, laughing, his hand on the small of her back. I lifted my phone and snapped a photo. That night, Gavin came home late, saying there'd been an emergency surgery. I nodded, heated up leftovers, listened as he told me all about a ruptured appendix in a 6-year-old. "You look exhausted," I said softly, noticing the faint trace of lipstick on his collar, Calla's shade. "It was intense," he replied, reaching for my hand. "But I'm home now." The tenderness in his voice nearly broke me. In that moment, I realized something devastating. The man I had married, the man sitting across from me, was a stranger. And so was my sister. I gently pulled my hand away. "You should get some rest," I told him. That night, as Gavin slept beside me, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me break down. No screaming. No crying. No messy scene they could twist into a story about a jealous, irrational wife. Instead, I would do what I do best. I would build a case. I spent the next 2 months living a double life. By day, I was Alara Hart. Loyal wife, devoted daughter, loving sister. I hosted Sunday dinners. I texted Calla like nothing was wrong. I kissed Gavin goodbye each morning. By night, I became something else. A detective in my own life. A quiet collector of truths. And the more I uncovered, the worse it got. They had created a shared digital calendar, coded with vague titles like yoga or client lunch, to coordinate their meetups. They had a joint credit card I never knew about, used for hotel rooms and out-of-town dinners. They were even discussing a future together, a house they might buy, trips they wanted to take. All after the Alara situation was handled. My first attempt at confrontation was subtle, strategic. I waited until Gavin was tired, mellow from a glass of wine, sitting with me on our front porch swing. "I think we should talk about Calla," I said casually. His body tensed just slightly. "What about her? I've noticed you two seem close." Gavin let out a light, forced laugh. "She's your sister, Viv. Of course we're close." "No. I mean really close." I held his gaze. "Is there something you want to tell me?" For a moment something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Recognition? But then he straightened. His tone turned cold. "I don't know what you're suggesting, but I don't appreciate it. Calla is family. If you're feeling insecure, that's on you." The gaslighting was seamless. Effortless. He spun it so quickly I almost doubted myself. Almost. I escalated. I left hotel confirmations open on his laptop, placed printed messages on the kitchen counter, strategically dropped hints, breadcrumbs leading straight to the truth. Each time he either deflected or dismissed it altogether. Meanwhile, Calla ramped up her own offensive. She started calling more often, suggesting sister time with fake enthusiasm. She introduced me to single men at gallery events, saying things like, "Gavin and I both think you work too much. You need to let loose." It was a masterclass in cruelty. Calculated. Performed with a smile. But the worst blow came from my mother. She was so proud, so touched, when she mentioned that Calla had been helping Gavin plan something special for our anniversary. "They've been so secretive about it," she said, beaming. "But they've been working on this surprise for months. Our anniversary was still 4 months away. They were using my own mother, as a cover for their affair. And that was when everything inside me went quiet. Still. Cold. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war." That evening, I left the evidence out in the open. Hotel receipts. Screenshots of their text messages. A neatly printed timeline highlighting overlaps, contradictions, and gaps in their stories. I placed it all on the kitchen counter, perfectly positioned for Gavin to find when he came home. Then I waited. He walked in 2 hours later, face grave, shoulders heavy. He spotted the folder almost instantly. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. "Yes, we do," I answered, calm and composed. He sat down across from me and slid a manila folder across the coffee table. I found something disturbing. I opened it, expecting to see my evidence. Instead, I found printed emails between me and a male colleague at work. Completely innocent exchanges about a project, but now carefully edited to sound flirty. Suggestive. "I know about David," Gavin said, his tone tight with manufactured hurt. "How long has this been going on?" I blinked, stunned. He was flipping the script. There was no affair with David. Those were work emails. But Gavin had twisted them into a convenient narrative, one where I was the unfaithful one. "They're about a product launch," I said slowly. "You know that." "They seem pretty intimate to me," he countered. "All those late nights, it makes sense now." It wasn't just deflection. He was laying groundwork, building his alibi, creating a justification, painting himself as the wounded husband who had no choice but to find comfort in someone else's arms. "I think we should take some time apart," he said gently, reaching for my hand like a concerned therapist. "This isn't healthy. For either of us." It was so polished, so rehearsed. I wondered how many times he and Calla had practiced this. "I'll stay at Calla's while we figure things out," he added casually. She offered her guest room when I told her what's going on. Of course she had. I nodded slowly, still playing the part. Time apart might be good. Relief washed over his face. He thought I was giving in. He thought I was retreating. He had no idea that I had just entered the next phase of my plan. While Gavin moved his things into Calla's apartment under the guise of taking space, I took a personal day from work. They thought I was at the office. Instead, I sat across from Calder Knox, a seasoned private investigator with a reputation for airtight work and a calm bulldog demeanor. He testified in hundreds of divorce proceedings and came highly recommended by a former colleague. "I'm not looking to hire you," I told him as I laid out my carefully organized folders and USB drive. I need a professional review of what I've gathered and guidance on what else I'll need. He flipped through the material slowly, brows rising with each page. Most clients come in with vague suspicions and screenshots, he said, nodding with a mix of respect and surprise. You brought me a trial-ready exhibit list. It's what I do for a living, I said. Just not usually in my own life. He leaned back. The affair's clear. But if you want leverage in a divorce, especially in a no-fault state like Washington, you need more than betrayal. You need deception, intent, financial misconduct, collateral damage. The stuff courts and judges don't ignore. I took notes as he spoke. He pointed me toward additional records, joint account transactions, text logs, statements from hotel staff, even a psychological evaluation if I wanted to show the mental distress. Your case is strong, he said. But if you're looking to destroy their version of the story, timing and delivery matter just as much as content. I walked out of his office with renewed clarity and a plan. Over the next month, I worked quietly and thoroughly. I dug deeper into our financials, uncovering what I hadn't seen before. Gavin had been transferring money from our joint savings to a private account for nearly a year. Calla had used my credit card without my knowledge, multiple times, charging dinners, ride shares, even lingerie. But what gutted me most came from Gavin's cloud backup. He'd forgotten to disable the sync. Every text, every photo, every shared file, still quietly uploading. I found entire conversations between them, discussing me in mocking, callous terms. She's so caught up in work, Gavin wrote. We could probably have sex on the kitchen counter, while she's typing away in the next room. She'd probably thank us for making the decision for her, Calla replied. She never really knew how to be a wife anyway. I sat frozen at my desk staring at the screen. It wasn't just cheating. It was emotional sabotage, systematic manipulation, a slow erasure of my dignity, engineered by the two people I had trusted most. The numbness that had protected me for so long cracked open, and in its place came a new feeling. Resolve. It was time to end this. On my terms. I made an appointment with Sabine Wilder, the most sought-after divorce attorney in Seattle. She reviewed my files in silence, flipping through page after page of meticulously documented deceit. No emotion crossed her face. Just focus. Precision. When she looked up, her voice was matter of fact. This is exceptional documentation. Most clients bring me tissues and vague accusations. You brought receipts. Literal ones. What should I expect? I asked. With this much proof. A favorable settlement, absolutely. But let's be clear, Washington is a no-fault state. The court doesn't care why the marriage ended. Affairs won't win you extra points. I'm not looking for revenge, I said. I want clarity. I want the truth acknowledged. Not just in court. In front of everyone they lied to. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. Then you're not just fighting for legal justice. You want public justice. Yes. In that case, you need to control the narrative. Time the release. Make sure the message is impossible to twist. That was when it clicked. Gavin and Calla had built a story. A version of reality designed to excuse their choices and paint themselves as brave, romantic victims. I didn't want to scream at them. I wanted to dismantle them quietly, methodically, completely. And then, the perfect opportunity landed in my lap. A text from my mother. Family dinner this Sunday. Your father's birthday. Gavin and Calla both confirmed. Please come. Don't make it awkward. A final performance. The entire cast in one room. They thought they'd get to tell their story on their terms. They had no idea I was writing the final act. I spent the next 3 days assembling the final package, an evidence drop designed not to destroy, but to expose. Each email was tailored to its recipient. For my father, proof that Gavin had borrowed money under false pretenses while secretly siphoning funds into a private account. For my mother, the text threads where Calla used her to provide fake alibis. Mom, can you say I was at your place if Viv asks? For my cousins and aunts, side-by-side comparisons of what Calla and Gavin had told them, and what they were actually doing on those exact dates. And for myself, one master file, chronological, comprehensive, irrefutable. Screenshots, receipts, GPS logs, messages, photos. A digital autopsy of my marriage. I scheduled the email delivery for 7:15 p.m. Sunday night. 5 minutes after dessert. 5 minutes after Gavin's carefully rehearsed speech. I woke that morning with a strange sense of calm. The kind that comes when you've planned every move, every breath, every word. I wore a simple navy blue dress, the one Gavin used to say made my eyes look like the ocean. I put on my grandmother's pearl earrings. A quiet symbol of resilience. As I arrived at my parents' house, Calla greeted me with a fake smile and a warm hug. "Just checking you were coming," she said brightly. "Dad would have been heartbroken if you didn't." The audacity nearly made me laugh. Inside, the usual chaos of family filled the air. Laughter from the living room, clinking glasses, the smell of my mother's roast wafting from the kitchen. Gavin and Calla sat next to each other on the couch. Subtle but closer than necessary. Testing the waters. I helped set the table. Made small talk. Laughed at a joke I didn't hear. Ate a dinner I didn't taste. At 7:10, dessert was served, chocolate cake with mint frosting, my dad's favorite. At 7:14, Gavin stood and gently tapped his wine glass with a spoon. "I have something I need to share," he said, his voice somber but steady. "Alara and I have decided to divorce." The room fell silent. "It's been a painful process," he continued, "but one filled with a lot of love and reflection." He reached for Calla's hand. "And Calla and I have realized we have something real. Something we didn't expect." Every eye turned to me. Waiting. Expecting devastation. Instead, I picked up my phone, tapped the screen once, and said, "Everyone, please check your emails." Phones began to buzz around the table. One after another. The harmony of incoming emails arriving in perfect succession. Confused glances. Hesitant taps. And then silence. Complete, stunned silence, broken only by the sound of scrolling. My cousin David was the first to react. A low whistle. "Holy shit." My mother gasped again. Her face pale, her hands trembling. Calla grabbed her phone, swiping rapidly. Gavin just stared, confused, then alarmed, then furious. "What is this?" he demanded, looking straight at me. "What did you send them?" "The truth," I replied calmly. 6 months' worth. Organized for clarity. Calla's face drained of color. "These were private conversations." "You had no right, eh?" "They were about me," I interrupted, my voice like ice. "About deceiving me. Mocking me. Lying to our entire family. I had every right." My father, normally so reserved, slammed his phone on the table. His jaw clenched. "Gavin," he said slowly, dangerously calm, "is this real?" Gavin was still scrolling, his face twisting in desperation. This is taken out of context." "I included context," I replied. "Every message is timestamped. Every photo is geotagged. Every receipt cross-referenced." David held up his phone. "This message right here? Where you say she's so obsessed with work, we could have sex on the kitchen counter and she wouldn't notice. What context makes that okay?" Calla started crying. Her signature move. "I never meant to hurt anyone." "You didn't mean to," my mother snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "You slept with your sister's husband for 2 years." Gavin tried to interject again, doctor voice engaged, trying to manage the situation. This is clearly Alara's way of processing something painful. She's struggling. "Stop talking, Gavin," my father said sharply. "Alara doesn't fabricate evidence. It's her profession." Calla sobbed harder. "It wasn't supposed to happen. We didn't plan this. According to your texts my Aunt Patricia cut in, you planned everything. Even down to whether you tell Alara before or after Christmas." The room erupted not in yelling but in judgment. Controlled, cutting judgment. Aunts, uncles, cousins, friends. Each person reading through their own customized packet of betrayal. Watching the people they trusted self-destruct. And I didn't have to say another word. I sat in the eye of the storm, silent, steady, finished. I stood quietly and picked up my purse. "I should go," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. "Dad, I'm sorry this happened on your birthday." My father was already rising from his chair. "I'll walk you out." Outside, the summer evening wrapped around us, cool and still. He didn't speak at first. Just pulled me into a tight, fierce hug. "I had no idea," he said finally, his voice thick. "What you've been living through." "I needed to understand it before I could explain it," I replied. "And I needed everyone else to understand too, not just believe me out of loyalty." He nodded slowly. "You were always the strong one. Even when we didn't see it." That nearly broke me. But I just gave him a small smile and kissed his cheek. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a flood of messages, texts from family, voicemails from cousins, emails full of shock, support, and apologies for not seeing what had been right in front of them. I turned it off. I didn't need validation. I had the truth. The next morning, I filed for divorce. There were no arguments. No drama. Just signatures. And silence. Gavin and Kala tried to spin the story, of course they always would. But it didn't matter anymore. The narrative had been reset. Not by confrontation, but by evidence. 3 months later, I signed the final papers with my lawyer sitting across from me. "Do you feel satisfied?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "No," I said honestly. "Not satisfied. Just clear." That evening, I packed the last box in my new apartment overlooking Puget Sound. I watched the sun set over the water, soft orange melting into deep blue. Then slowly I deleted the investigation files from my computer. Click. Gone. The final step in closing the case. Tomorrow would be the start of a new chapter, one written entirely in my own voice. One where I was no longer someone's wife. No longer someone's sister. Just me. Ilara Hart. And that was more than enough.